You are live. Are we actually live? Huh. It's been a while since I've done one of these. I don't even know if this thing works anymore. Man, if anybody's out there, let me know if you're watching or something. Did this thing actually turn on or not? It's been a very quiet summer. Everybody, welcome to Tallybook Troubleshooting. I'm your host, Keith Stelter, trying to bring a little positive PR to the oil and gas industry. Today's show, if you're just tuning in, was supposed to be with John Blevins, and we were going to talk oil, God, West Texas. Unfortunately, maybe you've heard the news already. John wasn't able to make it due to the sale of Hibernia. So that news came out this morning. Congratulations to John Blevins and the guys over at Hibernia Resources on that big sale. John, if you do end up watching a little bit of this, hopefully we get you on the show in the next couple weeks when things settle down for you. And you can talk about, we could add that to the topics. But a great guy decided to help fill in. We talked about doing it a little bit, later, maybe in July, but he was more than enthusiastic to come on, Brandon Willis. But before we get to Brandon, Tallybook Troubleshooting brought to you by 413 Mechanical. Call us for all your construction needs, pipelines, facilities, concrete. We do steel fabrication. Check us out. We got shops in North Dakota. We got shops in Colorado. We just opened up one here in Odessa. Man, it is so glad to have everybody. I've had a busy spring. I was at the Bass Invitational, Oil Miss Bass Invitational. I was at the API Golf Tournament, AADE. Man, shout out to Scott Emerson who had me at the short course for Super Rod. I had a great time over there. That's in Lubbock there. The short course is amazing. I highly recommend checking it out next year. You won't regret it. A lot of great people. It's mainly artificial lift, but check it out. A lot of great other events coming later this year. The GPA in San Antonio. I might be broadcast from that. I might not be. I'm definitely broadcasting from the Permian Basin International Oil Show coming up later this year. Check it out. If you're tuning in, I see some of the comments finally coming in. Let me know where you're watching from. Good morning, Lord Bailey Midkiff, always supporting. Thank you, sir. Sir, yes, congratulations to John. It is amazing news, right? Like when he told me when he canceled, I'll have to admit, I texted him and I was like, is it a family emergency or is it something else? And he did not confirm, but he did not deny either. So Kevin tuning in from New Jersey. College Station. Love College Station. Wayne Brunt. Man, Wayne. All the way. I thought you were in New Mexico, Wayne. What are you doing up there? Bailey, North Dakota. Great summer. Oh, man, we're getting all the way from Nigeria. Somebody is watching on YouTube. Man, that's a rarity. Very, very big rarity. Richard Brainer. Thank you, sir. Good to have you this morning. Man, without further ado, you don't want to hear me just keep muttering along. I'm going to bring the man who's going to tell us how it is in the construction industry on both sides. We're going to get a little bit into faith, and we'll see where the conversation takes us. We're going to have a little bit of fun. It's been a while since we had one of these live ones. Have your questions ready. We'll have some time for it. And without any further ado, and keep those comments coming. We'll bring it up on the screen. Mr. Brandon Willis. Good morning, Brandon. Thank you for joining me, for filling in, for doing this.
Yeah, you bet, man. My pleasure. Glad to be here.
Man, tell everybody, for those who don't know Brandon, give a little brief introduction of yourself, where you've been, where you're at now, and kind of a little bit about yourself.
Man, I've been a little bit all over the place. I don't even really know where to start right now. We'll start with where I am now and we'll work backwards. So for most of my career with oil and gas has been on the consultant side of the house, which is where I am now. I work for Applied Consultants, but I'm working for right now ExxonMobil Global Projects up in Williston, North Dakota area. We're doing a bunch of gas gathering and stuff for XTO Energy. This would be kind of like a homecoming for me. Honestly, it's been really great. I'm back with my original project team from when I started out in inspection and construction management. So my project manager that I'm working for now is down in Houston. Same group that I was with when I was at old school. You'll hear me refer to XTO as old school XTO and new ExxonMobil XTO now. But old school XTO, we were up in the Marcellus, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, up in that area. So back, kind of like getting the band back together. It's been a really good run in the past and an excellent run right now. So having a good time and putting a lot of pipe in the ground. But specifically right now, I'm managing the pipeline projects for Exxon Global projects for the Bakken. And going back through the past, I've been back and forth on the contractor side of the house to the operator side of the house with the gas companies. So I was vice president of construction for a contractor out in West Texas before I came back up here. Ran the turnkey group, did EPC contracting, and then before that, spent about 8 years with Jetta Operating Company out of Fort Worth, managing West Texas projects out in the Delaware Basin, Barstow, Pecos area, Toya. And other than that, man, I've been kind of all over. I've put pipe in the ground all over Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Afghanistan.
Wow.
Yeah.
You were overseas?
Yeah. Back in 2014, I was a consultant for DOD on a project over there back in the 80s. And the Russian occupancy of Afghanistan, they actually drilled some gas wells up in the northwestern section of the country up toward Turkmenistan, and super high H2S concentration up there. So we built compressor station and amine plant, put 100 GPM amine plant in up there. And then another group, same deal. It was a US DOD, USAID, that infrastructure development program with Afghan Ministry of Mines. So they put 56 miles of 12-inch in the ground, and then I did the facilities with the compression and the amine treater, all for exactly. Man, I'm going to get some hate over this one because this is probably the biggest taxpayer waste of money that I've ever been a part of. But all for two customers in the entire country of Afghanistan. One was a hospital and one was a fertilizer plant. And
man, you can't hurt for a hospital, man. That's a good cause in Afghanistan. Come on.
They never put a single M of gas in the pipe over there. And to my knowledge, the other day I was actually involved with a conversation with some guys who are in the know. Anyway, I guess the Chinese are actually in possession of that facility right now, and that gas is going to China.
Well, you know what? I bet that's not the first government project that didn't go the way it was supposed to. But no, man, you've been overseas. I spent some time working over in Iraq with oil serve and stuff, so I know what you mean. It's a culture shock. It's makes you really appreciate working here in the U.S. and how fortunate we really are. So I wish more people, took advantage of those opportunities, and I think they'd really be more appreciative of what they really have here, right? Is that
exactly? Yeah, you see different parts of the world and you gain a different perspective on really how good we have it. We think that this country, and don't get me wrong, there's a lot of improvement, a lot of room for improvement, but there's still not another place on this.
Still the greatest country in the world, man. I'm an immigrant. It put a man on the moon and everything else is going on. Oh, got to shout out the boss this morning, tuning in from Grand Forks.
Hey, Harold. Good morning, bud.
It's
got to see Harold. Actually, just got to see Harold this past Thursday at a bid show. So glad to.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
Our bid processes up here. Yeah.
You mentioned. It took me for a second to wrap my head around. You kept saying putting pipe in the ground, and as a guy who spent nearly 20 years doing wireline, I always think a pipe going down straight down into the ground. And you're talking pipeline, you're laying it right along the top, right?
Yep, exactly. That's a lot of people hear, oh, you're in the oil field. Man, you work on the rigs, and you're on a frac crew or what? I'm like, no, their pipe goes this way. My pipe goes that way.
Yeah.
So it's two totally different aspects of it. but yeah, I've spent the majority of my career in the midstream and some in downstream. I've done a couple refinery projects, but for the most part, I'm not, and by no means do I consider myself a pipeliner. So I'm sorry for any of my guys, my team that are listening. It's just I'm typically not on the pipeline side of the fence. I'm used to being in the facilities. Compression and gas plants is really where I that's my comfort zone. It's what I call home. But it's been a good run. Like I've really had some good challenging projects and stuff that we picked up in the last few months. We did some wintertime construction. I got up here in the Bakken in late November. I got here on the 28th of November last year. It was 16 below, snowing sideways. We had a lot of challenges to adapt and overcome with up until mid-February. So the particular pipeline project we were on was it was an HDPE poly pipeline, big inch. And anyway, getting through all of the challenges of fusion and cold weather, really leaned heavily on some of my guys over at Secor. Huge shout out to those boys, John Huddick, John Trimble, Chris Waite. Man, those guys have been an asset that I'm proud to keep in my speed dial. But huge help from those guys. They've helped me out of more binds than I can count on one hand, probably both hands, really.
It definitely is a team effort out there. The oil industry, one of the great things I try to demonstrate in the shows and everything is not everybody has all the answers, and it doesn't matter how long you've been out there. There's always more to learn, and when you have great teams out there, it really makes life easier. For those of you just tuning in, wondering, man, I thought this was with John Blevins. John Blevins, if you're not aware, the news this morning, Hibernia Resources was sold this morning, purchased for it in a really large $1 billion deal. So John is, I imagine, pretty busy signing that over. He contacted me about a week ago. I tried doing my best to, let everybody know. And Brandon Willis, ExxonMobil, has decided to join us here and help fill in. So thank you very much, sir. So North Dakota's got to be a lot like, I'm originally from Canada. A lot of the, challenges up there. And we got Justin Martin's, minus 16. That's nothing. But I know we've seen some Justin, horrible weather up there, and so you got to get a lot done in the summertime, right? So now it's go time.
Yeah. Justin's comment, I was just saying that's where I started in November. That's what I walked into. But yeah, we had by early February, late January, early February, we were at one point 33 below with a negative 50 wind chill and 3 feet of snow on the ground, testing and putting pipe in the ground and everything else. So definitely comes with its own set of challenges, but this is my first stint in the Bakken in my career. So aside from this, the coldest that I'd ever worked in, we poured some concrete for some foundations at negative 24 when I was up in Pennsylvania back in I think it was either 2011 or 12 at that point. But for a guy from Texas and spent the majority of my oil and gas career in West Texas, it's been a learning curve for sure. But
what about Afghanistan? Afghanistan should have got pretty cold in some of the sections. Like everybody thinks the Middle East is hot all the time. What did you get any of the cold places?
No, northwestern part of there. I would compare it to working in Pecos, Orla, Carlsbad.
Okay,
I mean, it's very similar. 124 degrees, blowing sand, dust storms, Taliban. You throw a nasty scenario out there and you had it.
But, I saw a lot of that in Basra in Iraq, but I was very shocked. Northern Iraq had mountains with snow on it in the middle of summer, so it was very, very cool. One thing you kind of brought up, you wanted to say you weren't a pipeliner, you're more of a facilities guy. As a guy, like I said, I spent the majority of my career in wireline, so that's more upstream, and now that I'm kind of more midstream or construction focused, which kind of goes all over, I've noticed not a lot mixes. There isn't a lot of jobs. There are some, but if you're in upstream, you're in upstream, and if you're in midstream, you're in midstream. But in upstream, you're either in drilling or completions. There's a little bit of production and stuff mixed in too, but you're one side or the other. Is the pipeline and facilities guys kind of broken up kind of the same way? Is there like you're either kind of one or the other, or You know,
You will find I wouldn't know. I don't know really where that percentage would fall exactly. If I were to take a swag at it, I'm going to say that probably 30% of your midstream construction guys are able to effectively switch back and forth from one side to the other and keep a good balance there. But there's a different mentality that comes with laying pipe in the ground. You're out there on a 50-foot, for example, just say a 50-foot wide right of way, and you're putting 24-inch pipe in the ground, and you're following a center line. And if you're deviating a foot one way or the other off the center line, nobody's going to say a word about it. But in a facility where you got tight fabrication, if you're more than an eighth of an inch out, something's not going to bolt up. It's not going to line up right. You're going to end up, putting a bird beak in your flanges. And so there's just a different level of, I'm not going to say professionalism necessarily, but craftsmanship, I think is probably the right word. There's a different level of craftsmanship that goes into building a facility than there does with pipelining. Like, you can get out there and you can absolutely hustle on the pipeline side. You can get there's a lot of pipe crews
just
out there.
like upstream.
There's
Upstream,
a lot of pipe crews that are not happy if they're not putting a mile a day in the ground. And, and plus, depending on the size of the pipe and size of the spread, the length of the line and all this stuff. But, it's just, and I grew up, so I'm kind of third generation of construction here. My grandfather was a contractor. He owned a construction business over in Northeast Texas. My dad was a welder. I grew up, I cut my teeth on the back of a welding bed with a Lincoln SA 200 and a cutting torch and a stinger in my hand. And, 12 years old back then, nobody cared. Just, I'd go to work with Dad, and all I'd hear is, 40 feet, son. I'd get in the truck and throw her in gear and idle it up to the next joint, and they're welding away. And I was Dad's welder's helper a lot of times doing that. And he and Papa had a shop. Dad would always have some kind of fabrication project going on up there, or I've watched the oil boom go bust many times growing up, and it was one of those deals where nobody in our family has ever really been a one-trick pony. You could switch over, do dirt work. Dad could weld. He could run a blade, run any piece of heavy equipment out there, drive a truck, whatever. So I was really taught the value of not putting all your eggs in one basket and learn a little bit of everything, kind of be a jack of all trades. But I like to at least keep a few of those bullet points there where I like to be a master of a couple. But I want to be well-rounded enough to have a good, firm understanding of a little bit of everything in the job. I don't want to walk out on a project and have anything out there be completely foreign to me, but I know what it takes to put together the right team, and you do have to rely on your team. If you're going to be an effective construction manager or project manager, you gotta surround yourself with good people who are very knowledgeable at their craft, and rely on them and trust them to do their work. That's what it takes to be effective in that leadership position, is really being able to select and retain and develop that talent. And if I do my job really well, whenever it's time for me to move on to the next position, next job, next town, whatever the case may be, I have brought up at least one or two of my guys, and they're ready to step into my boots and fill my place whenever I'm gone. So trying to make sure that, good personal development, knowing that you've got the right people in the right seat on the bus, and the bus is headed in the right direction is a big key component of it. But the project management aspect of it is really fun to me. I like managing projects. I like people. I like interacting with people. Being able to carry on a conversation with the guy out there with a shovel in his hand and out there working in the ditch is just as important as being able to go down to Houston and step into a room with the engineering manager and talk specifics and get into details of the engineering and design and layout of a project. So, that's just kind of in a nutshell. That's why I love my job. That's why I really enjoy what I do. At this point in life, I can look back and, I'll hit the highlights for you. I can't imagine doing anything else at this point in life, but growing up, You
Well,
know,
never
growing up,
say never, sir. Never
no, I
say
would never.
never.
No,
If you would have told me 4 years ago I'd be having LinkedIn Live events, I would have laughed in your face. I grew up on a farm. My dad wasn't a welder, but I was around a lot of the similar stuff. We had to fix equipment when it needed to be, when the wheel broke off of a cultivator, you had to make it go. And uh, learn hydraulics, all that sort of stuff, and move that on to wireline and everything, hydraulics, wrenches, being around that equipment, even learning to drive. Like, I'm pretty sure the police in my town thought I was 16 when I was 12 years old because dad had me pulling the auger through town. So I know exactly kind of, and it's very refreshing to hear that other people out there feel the same way, had similar upbringings. And you're right. You can't move up unless you're bringing your team up. I've seen some people, they're afraid to bring people up because they're like, what if I get replaced? And it's like, well, how are you ever going to move up if there's nobody to replace you? So it's refreshing to kind of hear that. It's especially, you're working with a big company like you are right now. It sounds like they're in really good hands. Kind of pivoting here, you've worked on construction and as the operator from the customer point of view, starting with, what do you wish more operators or like the midstream companies knew to help out potential or current contractors? Like, what's a lesson you could pass on to them? And then we'll go to the other side. You know what I mean? Like, and we can get into his depth or whatever. I'm not trying to say anybody's doing anything wrong, but
yeah,
what's
absolutely. That's a great point. Great segue into this conversation, because there are a lot of lessons to be learned, and unfortunately, and I'll say that, and I mean that, unfortunately, there are too many guys in my position or a similar position throughout the industry who have never been on the contractor side of the house. And there are a ton of lessons that can be learned that can be transposed from one side of the fence to the other. Because you've got too many guys that look at construction who are on the gas company staff who have no idea what it takes as a contractor to build that project. They know the end result. They know what they want to see the project look like when it's done. And they know how they want it to operate, but they don't know how to make the sausage. They know what they want it to taste like. They know how to cook it. They don't know how to make the sausage, though. And that goes into what it takes to plan for a job, to staff up and equip a job, how to estimate. They don't know how to build a schedule. They couldn't tell you for anything to save their life how to build a manpower loaded and resource loaded schedule for equipment. And I feel like it's a tremendous help on both sides. If you got somebody as a construction manager, or somebody, on the gas company side as a construction manager who knows what the contractor needs to be able to build a project, what it takes, what all goes into it. And then vice versa. If you have somebody that's on the contractor side of the house who's spent enough time at the gas company, they understand what the client is looking for. So it's been a good, healthy blending of it for me to have a good, firm understanding of both sides of it. And to me, if you're going to set yourself up for success as the representative for the gas company, you need to be able to help your contractor be successful. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, you want your contractor to be able to come out there and, number one, work safely. You want them to have a project that was handed off to them in an RFQ that was thoughtfully scoped out and put together. And you want to have all the drawings, all the details. You need to know that all of your equipment, all of your procurement and everything is in line, your fabrication, your valves, your pipe, your fittings, everything is going to be laid out there on the site when you get there. Because whenever you, as a contractor, you come in and you hard dollar bid a job, you throw a lump sum number out there, you have assumed the risk for that schedule and that budget at that point. And that's what the profitability, that you get into all of your key performance indicators, your KPIs, tracking a job. Your two main KPIs for tracking any job is your schedule and your budget, right? So as you're going through that, you're picking up on the performance of the job based on the schedule, the performance on the job based on the budget. But you got guys that don't know how to cost track a job. They are just out there just throwing the job together, and they don't have any idea where they stand in the budget. They're only worried about the schedule. Like, well, we got to be done by June the 15th. It's June the 1st, and it's a 30-day project. We started on May the 15th. So I've got a 30-day window here to complete this project, and I've got $100,000, right? And you start, and you're not tracking your burn rate. You don't know where you stand in the performance of your job at any given time. And you get to the end of the job and you're 90% complete and you're 120% in your budget. You've lost money for your company at that point. And then what you're going to see from a gas company side, from my perspective on that, is what you're going to see is you're going to see shortcuts starting to be taken. You're going to see people trying to push and hit the accelerator on things and push harder. You get production bias brought into the project. Everybody's worried about production and turning this job out, get it brought in on time and everything. And then there's money being lost. And you have people that lose, you get really short-sighted at that point in time, and you lose focus on safety. And inevitably, whenever you run up on a tight deadline, you start running into budgetary issues and stuff like that. You're always going to run into a safety issue. And you start pushing your people too hard. You're pushing them to work longer hours. You're asking them to do things faster than they ought to be done. And anyway, so I think in that position, knowing that you've got somebody that scoped out a job and gave you a realistic timeline, and you're able to take that as a contractor and really put that and piece that puzzle together really well and build a good budget, build a good schedule, staff it with the right people, staff it with the right equipment, the right sized equipment, so on and so forth. I think that communication between professionals like that, somebody in my position, somebody on the contractor side of the house, having those open conversations, and you as a construction manager knowing that your contractor's here to make money. You can't cut their throat and expect them to come out here and do the job for free. Both sides have to have success. And if you're only looking for the bottom dollar every time on every project, you're probably not going to get the same contractor over and over and over again, because they come out there and tried to do it too cheap and they lost their butts on it the first job, and they're not going to come back. Or you weren't satisfied with the product that they delivered to you because you asked them to do it too fast and for less money than the project was really worth. So you lose consistency, you lose repeat business, you lose a lot of that.
Will you not choose somebody, like, say you have a project and you, with your experience, you know it should cost, let's say, one.
One of us froze up. Lose Keith.
Oh,
Yeah,
can you hear me? Am I back? Sorry about that. I don't know.
Okay.
Internet. Basically, I was just like, so you got a one bid of what you've expected, and somebody's 900,000, let's say. Will you discuss with the 900,000 guys, or will you just go and choose the 1.2 because, well, that's what it should be?
No. So I have a lot of input and insight into the creation of the AFEs for the project, which is the gas company side of the budget. We're using historical data off previous projects. You're taking your scope, you know what your pipe, valve, and fitting count needs to be for the project or whatever, you know what your land cost, your right-of-way cost, your inspection cost, all of the, you're summarizing all of this and you're putting it together and you're building a project budget. And then you have to take into consideration the timeline for the budget. Are you going to have to staff up or equip it a little more heavily to be able to get the job done on time? So there's a lot of variables that go into it, but as long as you're planning it that way, you should have a pretty reasonable expectation of where the bids are going to fall. And let's just say, like the bid show from last Friday, I send a RFQ out to 5 different contractors. I've got a pretty good idea that job ABC should come in at about $1 million. And 4 out of those 5 bids come in somewhere between 950 and 1.2. And then you look down here and you've got this outlier that's sitting down here at 800,000. I'm going to have a conversation because obviously $800,000 whenever I'm expecting $1 million, $1.2 million or something on a project that's cost savings. So what I would do is back up and have a conversation with them, go through clarifications and assumptions, make sure that they have a real firm understanding of the scope and that they didn't miss something. Because I don't want a contractor to get involved in a project with me and go bankrupt 3/4 of the way through, and I'm left holding the bag and end up with liens and stuff like that from their third-party vendors on my project. So I'm looking for the contractor who has the most complete understanding of the scope of work, who has the most complete, like just overall quality of a contractor that I'm looking for. I'm looking for that good safety profile. I'm looking for good performance. I'm looking for the contractor who has a good history with the company as well, who's familiar with our construction and installation procedures, who has a good track record of safety with us. And this is anywhere I go. I'm not just being specific to,
No,
where I'm
100%.
today.
I agree. Yep. No, I get what you're saying. Do you think that's the norm now in the industry? Because
No.
over the years, I've seen, where we kind of know what this should cost. And some guys will go lower because they really need the work or they'd like to in the door. And I understand that. But then I saw one bid where it was just like, you couldn't even, buy it used, or it was a particular piece of, gas processing equipment. And we were just dumbfounded at the price that this other, competitor was offering it. But the big company that, we were supplying the bid for still took it. And I was just like, in the end, I guess where I'm going with it, is there consequences? Let's say you went with that really cheap guy and it turned into a horrible mess. What's the consequences, I guess, from a contractor's point of view? Or not the contract, from an operator, like you, the project manager, are you just, you were trying to save the company money so they understood, or is there big consequences on that side?
If you're looking at it through the lens of the bottom dollar, which I feel like is really kind of an immature thought process. If you're in a position like this and you're the one that's responsible for making the contractor selection, because like I said, you're taking into consideration a multitude of things. You're looking at safety, you're looking at performance and quality, you're looking at, you and I've had this conversation. I'm looking for a contractor with integrity. Boy, this is gonna hit some people in the feelers right here. But I'm gonna tell you
If we
right
don't
now,
have to, to me, I think everybody kind of gets where you're going, right? At the end of the day, it's a partnership. Even though you're bidding and you're the customer and you're the supplier, it's got to be mutually beneficial. Otherwise, it really, there would just be check boxes and someone would just check a box and there really wouldn't be people involved in these bids anymore, right? Like, I think that's really the human element at this point, I think, is what you're trying to. I could be wrong, maybe not.
no, you're picking up what I'm throwing down for sure. But where I was headed with this, I'm going to go ahead and throw it out there because it's important to me. You asked me, you want to know who I am, how I was brought up, where I come from in the industry. This is it. I will summarize this for you right now. And this has happened a handful of times, and it really made me question myself. Like I got kind of introspective on this deal whenever it happened to me the first time. And then I figured out that it's more prominent in this industry than you realize. But this pay to play stuff, man, like I've had contractors just straight up hit me up in the position I'm in right now. And what do we have to do for you to get in there and get involved in your work? I'll tell you right now, what you got to do for me is you need to come in, you need to give me a quality bid. You need to show me that you're capable. You need to give me a good list of references, because I'm going to call, if I don't have any experience with you or your company, I'm going to look for references. I'm going to call people you worked with in the past. And if it's in close enough proximity where I can do it, I'm going to go drive out and I'm going to lay eyes on some of your work myself. But I'll tell you right now, the fastest way to get booted out of my office is to walk in and ask, what can I do for you personally to get involved in your projects? I'm going to tell you right now,
Unfortunately, it's out there, right?
you're
And there are
you're
some.
never going to own me, and you're never going to be able to buy my integrity, and you're never going to be able to put me in a position where my name gets tarnished because you're not a good enough contractor to come in here on your own merits and get the work. So,
And you know what? I think that's a good segue to actually how we met. Is
mm-hmm.
I had a nice pay it forward Friday. LinkedIn has been great for me, and I've always tried to kind of, you know, pay it forward. And I have this pay it forward Friday, and I was actually featuring a young man named Michael Giroux, who was looking for an internship. He was kind of late to the party, and I had a friend, hey, can you feature him? And most of the posts actually do quite well. They get, you know, more than 10,000 views and stuff. But this particular one wasn't doing all that great. And actually, it was you. We weren't connected. You were like, hey, man, you know, ExxonMobil's looking for one. Send them my way, right? And I think that speaks to your, you know, character and stuff where you go, hey, here's this guy. He's trying to help this guy. I'll try and, you know, what's a matter of just, you know, a nice little comment here. And that's how, you know, you can kind of figure out, well, this guy's, you know, not going to show up in my office and offer me a, you know, a new four-wheeler or something too, right? Not that, you know, it happens out there. And we don't have new four-wheelers to give away. So, and at the same time, working in those kind of situations isn't going to be great because as soon as something goes south, you know, nobody's going to work together to try and fix it. Everyone's going to start pointing fingers, and it's going to, you know, really go south in a hurry. And I think, you know, I think that's a good segue into the next kind of topic we were going to discuss. Because for those of you, once again, tuning in, I know John Blevins we were supposed to have, and the topic was going to be oil, God, and West Texas. If you haven't heard yet, Hibernia Resources was they just announced their sale today. Brandon has, you know, graciously come on and filled, and it's been a great conversation so far. Like, we're 37 minutes into here. I thought we'd been talking about 5. So thank you so much again for coming on here.
Yeah.
Faith, right? Like, it goes into faith and being you know, God. I try and, you know, I don't try and shove it down anybody's throats, but God has blessed me, and I've given thanks online, and I try. And John Blevins is too. One of the topics we were going to talk about is he loves posting about scriptures and stuff. And one of the discussions we had, I'm not trying to put anything in his mouth. I'm hoping he'll come on, but he'll get messages and say, man, I wish I could do that. Being in the oil and gas industry, I was under the impression we're a pretty conservative industry, aren't we? Like, most of us kind of do believe in God and have some faith. What's your feelings on that? Have you got faith? Have you always believed where we can get it as far or as shallow or however you want to go?
I'm not scared to preach into the topic. I mean, you always hear how taboo it is to talk politics and religion, but I'm going to tell you right now, I wouldn't be alive and sitting here talking to you today. And we'll get into this story in a minute, but I firmly believe that I would not be here having this conversation with you today if it were not for faith and the power of prayer. That simple. I'll elaborate, but yes, I grew up in the church, Church of Christ, going, man, we were there every time the doors were open, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, gospel meetings. I mean, anything that could be involved in. Mom taught Sunday school. My dad was a deacon. Grandparents went, I mean, it was just, it really was just, it was a part of life. It was a way of life. It was life. You know, it's what, I'm just going to tell you, man, it has been a very important part of my life growing up.
So you've always had, you know, it's always been around. See, myself, my grandmother was very, faithful to the church and stuff, but my dad kind of went away. He, you know, was a great farmer and stuff, but he kind of had a falling out. So it hasn't been until, you know, I got married here and had my kids again that I've really kind of come back to it. And it really, you know, we pray every night with the kids and we say our prayers and we give thanks and we try and, you know, instill that in them. And it's, you know, having that faith is really, I don't know. I feel like my life is better for it.
Yeah. Yep, same. And, full disclosure, man, I mean, same way growing up, was heavily involved. I mean, there would be, I mean, I think whenever God blesses you with a talent, you're supposed to use it, right? And mine has been the ability to speak and communicate well with people. Um, I led, back whenever I was a lot younger, led singing at church and would go up and lead the congregation in prayer. Stepped in and actually delivered a message on Wednesday night more than a handful of times. It was afterwards. So I guess, there's always things in life that kind of change your outlook on things. And like I said, I grew up in the oil and gas industry. My dad being a welder, we lived all over the place. It was kind of like we followed the work, but it was more so that the family could stay together. But we moved all the time. And I had my mind made up there for the longest that I didn't want to follow in the footsteps. I didn't want to go into the oil field. So I stepped up and decided to enlist in the Marine Corps, and got back home from boot camp and came back, and my parents were divorced. What? You've been married for 23 years. What are you talking about? And I think that, I'm not even going to breach off into that topic any further than what I just said right there. But it was one of those things that just kind of rattled the foundation of everything that I knew and everything that I believed. And, I just kind of fell off to the wayside, I guess, if you will, and didn't take into account, whenever I got married, the importance of sticking to those beliefs in that selection process, if you will. And, things just changed. I got away from it, and it has taken up until the last few years really for me to get my head back in the right space. And, I'm not even sitting here trying to pretend that I'm even this great guy or whatever. I've got the grace of God. I've got the power of forgiveness, and I know that. But I'll tell you, really, a turning point for me was late 2020. I really wish I don't know. I don't know if I want to get off that far into it with a whole bunch of strangers, but I'm really proud of this testimony. This is something that I've got to offer. And, we were talking, and I will start out the conversation. I was going to end it with this, but I'm going to start it with this. So a lot of people will claim, they've got a favorite scripture, favorite book of the Bible, their favorite place to go on a bad day or whatever. And I'll lead into the conversation with this. My probably second closest scripture to my heart is Psalm 107:2. And it's let the redeemed, and this is, I think, is like the translation from NIV. King James is a little bit different, but the same message. This is just modern day translation of it, right? Psalm 107:2 says, "Let the redeemed of the Lord tell their story, he who has been delivered from the hand of the enemy." And, I'm not big into having a bunch of tattoos and stuff that are out there for everybody to see, but I will lead with right here on my left forearm. I got a semicolon and never quit. And that has been a conversation starter for me to be able to lead into this story more times than I can count. So in late 2022, I would venture to say, without a doubt, I was in the best shape of my life. I'm 6'1", and I was about 235 to 238 pounds, and I carried maybe on a bad day carried about 10% body fat. Like I was there. I lived in the gym. It was my stress relief. It was my go-to place after work.
Same way. Yep.
Go burn off
Wednesday.
Yep. Go burn off some stress and take it out on the weights. Rough day at work, take it out on the weights. Rough day at home, take it out on the weights. Like I just got to a point where and I still work out. Nothing like I did back then, but we'll get into some understanding of it in a minute. But yeah, I like to pick up heavy stuff and move it around and put it down. It was just who I was and what I did, and was very happy about being in the best shape of my life at 42 years old. And man, I just started getting sick. Started getting this very unwell feeling throughout my body. There's no other way to describe it. One thing led to another. Telltale signs started showing up. I was having some really bad digestive issues and stuff, and went to a gastroenterologist, colonoscopy, found out I had ulcerative colitis. I really didn't even know what it was. I didn't know anything about it. Had no idea really what it was. They gave me an explanation of it that was way up here. I needed an explanation that was about right here at eye level, and it was over my head. So I had to go home and do my own studying and figure out really what it is. You know, what is this thing that I have that's changing everything about me? I was dropping weight so fast. I couldn't eat. I didn't have an appetite. That was October 2nd of 2020 is whenever I found that out, got the diagnosis. By November 11th, I went into the hospital in Lubbock. At that point, I was down to 190 pounds from 235. And
Wow, it's very significant.
Yeah. I mean, I was just dropping weight like crazy. Couldn't just, I was getting to the point where I couldn't function. And I called my wife. I was leaving from job site. I was out in Barstow and out by Pecos. And I knew that I was really in bad shape. Like I had no business driving. Called her and let her know that I was on the way. And I was going to try to make it all the way to Lubbock. And it was a 3-hour drive, doing well, you know. Got on into the drive. I knew she was running through an area with no service. I was trying to just keep my focus and stay on the road. Called my dad. I was on the phone with my dad and started telling him what was going on. And, you know, and at this point, I really hadn't shared this information with any of my family, so they were kind of shocked. But I was not able to make it all the way to Lubbock. I pulled over in Andrews and
Go ahead, take your time, man.
so tried to walk myself into the ER, and I didn't make it. I parked my truck out in the parking lot and was making my way up to the covered awning to walk into the ER, and I collapsed. So they took me into the ER they come pick me up, put me in a wheelchair, took me straight back, put IV fluids in me, started drawing blood and everything. And anyway, my wife at the time, she got there, and once they got a couple bags of IV fluid in me, they told me straight up, like, you need to get to Lubbock ASAP. We can send you on an ambulance, or she can take you if you're going straight there. So loaded up, left my truck in the parking lot, locked it up. We took off, went to Lubbock. I went straight went straight up to the hospital. In the hospital for a solid month. November come up November 24th. By the time the in and out I was in the hospital for a month, but November 24th was the day I ended up having emergency surgery. But I had a team of GI doctors that were there, and they were just very, like, you could tell that they were stressed about this case. They knew that nothing they were doing was my body wasn't responding to anything. And they were giving me every medication known to man. Humira, Remicade mixed with chemotherapy. I was on 120 milligrams a day of prednisone. Like, I was ragged.
You're in rough shape. Life's not looking good. So what turned it all around, man?
So I had a colorectal surgeon come in, a guy named John Kidwell. He's a doctor at UMC there in Lubbock. And he came in, and he's like, he was standing kind of off in the back corner of the room for a few minutes while the team of GI doctors were standing there at the foot of my bed giving me this horrible prognosis. And he just kind of stood back there very calmly and quietly, and he waited on them to leave. And he says, Mr. Willis, I'm Dr. Kidwell. He said, I'm here to talk to you about your situation. I said, okay. Talk to me, doc. And he laid it on me, man. He's like, look, he said, you've got 2 or 3 days. That's it. He's like, you have to let me do surgery. He said, I know that they're telling you there's hope, that you can try this, you can try that. He said, the reality of the situation is, he said, if you want to live to see your 43rd birthday, you're going to have, he's actually what he told me. He says, if you want to live to see Christmas Day with your kids, he said, you're going to have to let me do surgery. He said, so I need you to think about it and I need you to give me an answer in the morning. Talked about it with my wife, talked about it with my dad. You know, I was like, there's nothing to talk about here. There's no question what I have to do. But I knew it was going to be a substantial surgery. There was a lot of risk involved in it. I hadn't been allowed to eat a single bite of food or a drop of water even for over 20 days at this point. I was being fed by PICC line.
Yeah.
So they were cramming milk in a bag down my IV, and that's the only thing that was keeping me alive. And at this point, I was down to 142 pounds. So doctor was afraid to do surgery. He gave me all of the risks and everything. And this is where my testimony comes in right here. In addition to a couple of nurses that I had there who were strong women of faith, this one nurse she had a testimony that was just amazing. And she came in and shared it with me, came in and prayed with me. And Dad and I were talking that same day, and he asked me what I thought. He said, I'm going to tell you what I want to do. He said, I'm going to call the elders at the church. He said, I want to get the right people involved in praying for you. And you know, this will go into it here in a minute. I'll tell you my favorite book in the Bible is the book of James. Everyday living, there's a scenario in there that you can pull strength, pull power from that, and just good guidelines for how to get through life. But in particular, the one verse that stands out in it is the effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. And you know, if you're sick, call upon the elders. That's exactly what happened. So Dad called Luke Nickerson and Jay Johnson, a couple of the elders at the church there, and they started praying together. Like Dad was staying at my house in Lubbock while I was in the hospital. It was during the peak of COVID, only allowed visitors during certain hours, and you know, it was one of those deals where I spent the majority of that time laying there in the hospital bed, couldn't talk. Had an NG tube down my throat, oxygen, IVs in every place you can imagine. So I was really at a point where I really couldn't do anything for myself. I couldn't even talk really. I mean, I was at a point where I was in so much pain, on so much medication and stuff, that I was just almost in a vegetative state. And so anyway, we made the decision. We got surgery scheduled for a day later. They took me in. They said the surgery should go about 4.5 hours. I think in about 3 hours, my wife said one of the nurses came out and gave her an update, and she didn't hear anything else until the end of 8.5 hours. So 8.5 hours later, under deep anesthesia and everything else, I mean, my colon was so ate up, it was just burned out. It was non-functioning. It was paper thin. The doctor said he could read a newspaper through it. And attached to my liver. I mean, it was so swollen and distended, it was attached to the right lobe of my liver, attached to my diaphragm. I mean, they had to do, I've got so much scar tissue. It's unbelievable. But anyway, surgery came through, spent like another week in the hospital, had a really hard recovery, just getting back to the point where I could even get food in me. But when it came out, I was 138 pounds the day that I went home from the hospital. And that was, I didn't have a single piece of clothing in my closet that fit me, you know. And anybody who knows me, you see me anywhere. I mean, I'm starched and ironed, crease in my jeans, my shirts. You're not going to find me running around like a bag of rags. I mean, it's just the way I grew up. Mom starched and ironed our clothes all the time growing up, and it's one of those things that just stuck with me. I was stuck to t-shirts, hoodies, and jogging pants, you know, just hated the way I felt about everything, hated the way I looked. because I went, like I said, went from being in the best shape of my life to that. But the prayers continued every day, all day. I was getting messages, notifications, emails, messages on Facebook, messages from friends on LinkedIn, calls, to family. Like there was a long time. I just gave my wife my phone. Like I can't reply to anybody. I'm not in any kind of shape to talk or reply. There's no telling what I would say.
That's got to
And
be a good feeling, right? Like having that much support and people reach out.
yeah, yeah. And, so being a contractor, I was a 1099 contractor at this point. I was working for Jetta out there in West Texas. And, um, I had a substantial amount of money in savings and always thought that I was in good shape. Like I'm not worried about health issues or anything. I didn't have an individual insurance policy or anything, but came out of the hospital with about $1.2 million in medical bills. But aside from all of that, I turned from being 138 pounds down from 235, lost almost 100 pounds in 3 months. My body was in shock, like absolutely just, my body didn't know how to respond to anything that I did. And I couldn't, there's a lot of foods and stuff now. So just full disclosure, I mean, it's one of those things like people understand whenever I say I had my colon removed, like I don't have a colon, like I have an ostomy, and most people would never know it seeing me. I put all my weight back on, with a lot of help from Little Debbie and Bluebell ice cream. I just said weight back on.
I get you. I'm 42 as well.
Yeah,
was there.
But I once I got it back on and got to the point where I could just get some energy, I was right back to the gym, back to working out, back to doing my thing. Pushed it too far a couple times, ended up where some of my scar tissue ended up with a hernia and stuff. But I put all of that weight back up. Well, I made it back to 200 pounds. I was back at 200 pounds by March the 1st. So I'm sitting here talking to you right now, back at 225. Prayer continues to this day. I mean, I've got a network of people who I went from acquaintances to friends, and friends to brothers during this time period. This is when you see the people who are really there for you in life show up, or they run away. Unfortunately,
that's what I want to talk about.
Unfortunately, if you ran away, and I can look back and say, so long, good riddance, whatever. Because if you can't stick with somebody through the hard times, then you weren't really ever there to begin with.
And that's you've just shared a very powerful story. Great interactions with people with prayer. Why do you think so many people, especially online in the oil and gas industry, are afraid to share some of that? Like why, you brought it up, it's taboo or whatever to talk religion and politics, but what affects your life more than religion and politics? Why do you think we went that way? And why do you think we can't have these discussions? Like to me, I feel a lot closer to you now and I hope, you sharing that with some people. Like you've probably inspired a few other people to maybe pick up the good book that I haven't read in a long time. Like I see a lot of positives here. Where really is the negative of this conversation? Why do you think people don't have them?
I don't see a negative, Keith. I don't see how there is a negative. What do you have to lose by sharing a testimony like that of your own faith? I mean, because you can tell me what you believe, and it's fine. I'll hear you out. I'll engage in that conversation with you. You can tell me that you don't believe there's a God. You can tell me that you think that we all happened from a collision of atoms in outer space, and that that everything happens the way that it happens just because. And there's no way, man. You can't.
Well, who's not to say that God put those atoms in that way, and that was his way of creating everything? Like that's how I kind of maybe how it's interpreted or whatever, but I feel like he's pushing, like, I can't ignore a lot of the stuff
I
that
mean,
I've seen and not think that somebody's in charge. Like, when I was looking for a job earlier this year, I had a few people, like, kind of coming up to me, and I was like, man, praying about this, like, what's a good sign? And these guys, 413, and he's like, yeah, it's from, 4:30, it's from Philippians 4:13. And I was like, well, I think that's a pretty good sign right there. Everybody else is not to say that everybody else wasn't good or stuff, but I just was like, okay, I kind of took that as a sign. I feel that's all around us. Now, maybe that's just me looking, and you can interpret that any way you want, but I don't feel like having that discussion is a bad thing.
yeah, I agree. And you and I can have the debate if you want to, but I'm not really even open to that much interpretation on it. I mean, it says God formed us in his own image and breathed life into our bodies. That's the story of creation. It wasn't collision of atoms in outer space or a big bang or we evolved from monkeys or whatever. I mean, this is how we were designed. God made every man and woman, male and female, and we're made in his image, so there's no guesswork to it, in my opinion. It's we were created. We didn't happen. We didn't evolve. We were created. So
there's no denying it. Like, I think, wasn't it just the other day they found Noah's Ark on that mountain in Turkey or something? Like, who was crazy? Like, some of the stuff that's out there right now, like, it just, I to me, it's great to have these, to not be afraid of your faith, and have the discussion. Like, it, I don't know. I don't think we should be, especially in the oil and gas industry. Like, we're pretty.
the oil and gas industry has such a reputation. I think this is probably where you see a lot of the people shy away from the conversations. There is a persona, a stigma, even, I guess, that you could say that goes along with it, of this image of everybody thinks that any and everybody in the oil field is just is roughnecks or whatever, and they've got this idea that we're a bunch of uneducated heathens, just, and you hear oil field, like, oh gosh, you're that oil field trash or whatever. And it's unfortunate that there is a lot of that in the industry, because there's good money to be made out here. It attracts people from all walks of life. But man, there's a lot of really good people in this. I mean, I work with some of them hand in hand every day, and I'll tell you right now, I've got a couple guys that I work with that I know, whenever they say, "Hey man, know you're going through some stuff. I'll be praying for you." I don't doubt it a bit. I don't doubt them. I don't doubt it a bit. It's more than lip service. We just had this conversation last night. One of our guys, we were having another unrelated conversation about some stuff going on at work, and he said, "Hey, I just wanted to let you know, every single night my wife and I are praying for you." And I take that at absolute face value. I believe it. And so Steve, I appreciate you. But having people like that on your side, man, why would you not want people in your corner who also share your faith, who, when they say they're going to pray for you, you that they're not just giving it lip service. They're going to go home and they're going to say their prayers at night, and they're in your corner. They got your back. And then the same thing whenever you tell somebody that, like, man, I'm sorry to hear that. We'll be praying for you. Don't just say it as like a consolation or something right there in the moment.
Go ahead and do it.
Do what you said you're going to do. I mean, follow up with it. Say a prayer. I'm living proof that it works. I mean, you can argue with me and tell me that you don't believe there's a God, that prayer is, thoughts and prayers. Thanks for your thoughts and prayers. Whatever. You can go out there and argue with that stop sign and still says stop. You can tell me that there's no power in prayer, but I'm sitting here today and telling you that there is, and I'm alive because of it. And the fact that even my surgeon that performed he performed the surgery that ultimately saved my life. He said a prayer with me before surgery. I mean, he was a man of faith. He knows that he's not God. He has the
There's
ability.
more out there that we
He has
don't
the ability to
understand,
let
and
God
that's
guide his
faith.
hands and fill his head with the information and the knowledge that he needs to be able to do this stuff. But whenever you've got somebody with that kind of a mindset, I think that's a force to be reckoned with.
Yes, sir. And to me, that's when I kind of started this show. A lot of people had podcasts and stuff where they'd have people come on, they just tell their life, stories. And originally, this was a show of just troubleshooting stories. You had a problem. It was those you know unique oil field problems that needed a unique oil field solution. And as kind of time went on and got on a few more events, it just became more about helping the industry get good PR. And like you said, this industry's filled with great people. And as long as they're willing to come forward and tell these stories, a lot of times I see people not willing to come forward, or they're afraid, or their company won't even let them speak, right? Like to this point, I don't think we've covered any kind of topic that a company could go, oh man, we can't, can't back that up. You know what I mean?
So,
Like, me,
and I'll tell you full disclosure here. I had to have clearance through certain legal things I can and can't get into, whatever, through Exxon before I could have this conversation. Even especially being, I'm a contractor. Like I said, I'm a consultant for Exxon. I'm not a company employee. So there are things that we get into. We can't talk about volume commitments and things like that.
I think we've had a great
what well
conversation without even
performance we
getting into
have.
that, right?
But there's relationships that are really what drive this industry. And you find people who are the most successful in this industry are the ones who really nurture those relationships and are genuine people. And I can tell the difference in a salesman and someone who believes what they're coming to sell me. When you got somebody that really believes in their company and believes in the mission statement of their company, believes that the ownership of their company is they're good, moral, ethical people. Those are the drivers that make this industry turn around. Everybody else is just fluff. There's a place and a time for everybody, but you will see that the ones who stand out from the rest and who have long-term success in the industry are the ones who are doing it right. And there's always going to be a set of guiding principles in there that fall back to good ethics and morality. That's just my firsthand observation. So whenever, started the conversation with you and Harold, talking about 413, that was one of the first things I brought up. It's like, I don't see it. There's nothing direct to it, but the logo is 413. I said, so I'm going to make an assumption and step out on a limb here and say that that's in reference to Philippians, right? Absolutely. And Harold had said it is like, man, it's great whenever you've got somebody that's intuitive enough to pick up on that and that
We have
knows.
a great comment on there. Yep, do all things through him, right?
Yep.
I took it as a good sign. To me, it's I don't know. There's so much more we don't understand. Why not talk about it more? And
I've been happy so far. I've looked down. I see some of the comments as they're popping up, and I'm looking and I'm seeing some familiar names and stuff on here, and some of the comments are great. There's some guys from actually a couple contractors are doing some work for me right now who were at the bid show with you guys. So I saw Chris Jimenez is logged in on there. I saw Tony Fernandez pop his name up a minute ago, and Tony and I worked together in my previous role when I was on the contractor side, and he's moved on to some bigger and better things. And I know we'll have the opportunity to work together again. But man, it's when you get into those working relationships that turn into friendships that, like I said, go from being a friend to having that bond is like you can feel that this guy's my brother. If I needed to call him at 2:00 in the morning and just say, man, I'm broke down on the side of Interstate 70 out in the middle of nowhere, somewhere in Colorado is all I know. Can you come get me? You know, this guy knows me well enough to know that I have thought through every possible solution. I know that I'm too broke down to fix myself. And he's not going to ask any questions. Like, man, this guy, he knows what he's got going on here. And if he says he needs help, I'm on my way. And I've probably got, I might be stepping out there and say that I've probably got 4 people like that in life. My circle's very small on purpose. Like I keep those who are closest to me are very close to me. And, you know, I've got a lot of buddies and acquaintances and stuff like that, but there's a core group that you stay tight with. And, you know, I know that those are the guys who know they can call me. They're the guys that I know who I can call on, and every one of them are good Christian men.
Justin Martin,
within that itself.
Would you connect with me if possible? He's up in Canada working for CNRL out there, and I think it's Lloydminster, right, sir? So big oil company up there. I'm thinking you might have a few fans or something after this one. I was going to see if we could take a bunch of questions up, but man, we're an hour and 10 minutes into this.
I'm good. Usually you are, man. However long y'all want to hang, I'm here. I'll take.
Well, okay. We'll start to wrap things up with anybody got any quick questions for Brandon, and we'll wrap things up. Man, this was a really great conversation. I tried to not plan too much. Like we talked before, you know, we were kind of into that, getting into this, and you know, being charitable and donating money. And one of the things I've noticed, you know, when you are charitable and stuff, I've never missed any of the money I've given away. Or any, you know, like if I've donated here to so-and-so, you know, I've seen, you know, someone's house burned down and they have the GoFundMe, and I send them $300 or whatever, you know, it always seems to come back, and it's not like, oh man, now I'm $300 short for something else. So
it'll get multiplied back to you.
And
it may not be the money that gets multiplied back to you, but your life will be enhanced more than you could ever do on your own by that. I firmly believe that, because I mean, I know that I had people stepped up and helped me in, you know, the worst time of my life. And I had people who I really never expected to be the ones to show up, who showed up the hardest. I mean, they were really there. I had some guys that, you know, I knew were good people. We were never that close of friends, and we've turned out to be really good friends since. It's just like like I said, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Man, I've just said that so many times. Like I've seen who some of the toughest ones are, and they're the ones that show up in your corner whenever the days are getting long and rough.
Yes, sir. Well, we've given everybody a chance. Oh, okay. We got a question coming in here. There was one earlier. Actually, Justin Martin's had one, and basically he was asking, have you seen the industry? Is it getting better or worse over time for as far as, you know, contractor operator kind of relations? I think that was kind of the gist he was getting at.
Man, I don't know. Honestly, I think it's better, because when you go through the up times and you go through the downturns, you end up seeing who has the staying power. You end up finding out who the fly by night, pop up here and they're gone tomorrow type of contractors are. And you end up finding out who has the resolve, who has the staying power, who has, you know, who's diversified beyond just one niche market. I think that's where you see the staying power. So we've had the guys who were here pre-COVID and the ones who are still existing post. You've got some pretty hardy people. So I think right now it's turned out to be pretty good.
One more question here from Michael Houston. What do you see the biggest roadblock to management when going from contractor to company, or vice versa?
I think if you've had an extended period of time on the gas company side, you're going to find it harder to step into a management role on the contractor side if you don't understand the fundamentals of the contractor side of the business. Um, I think it's probably an easier step into a management role from being a contractor to the gas company side than it is vice versa.
Very well said. Thank you, sir. Well, we'll wrap things up. Chris, thank you for tuning in on YouTube. Nobody ever watches this thing on YouTube, and I think I have like 5 people watching this thing on YouTube. Wow, that's gonna set a record. It never tells me how much are actually watching on LinkedIn. There's definitely had to be more than 5. My wife didn't tune in. She took the kids out of the house, so with summer vacation, the kids are all over their iPads and all kinds of things that use the internet. I know I paused out there once for a second, so I'm glad she did. Thank you to everybody who tuned in. Really appreciate it. Brandon, really appreciate you doing this.
Appreciate the
This was a
invite.
great conversation. Man, it just flew by. Hour and 15. Okay, that's a really good one, man. It doesn't get better than that. Stay around. We'll close things up, and everybody, thank you once again. John Blevins couldn't tune in. COO of Hibernia, congratulations to John. Thank you, Brandon, for stepping in. This was a great conversation. And until next time, everybody, that's how you troubleshoot. Have a great day.